Coming up on Network Africa. Chadian military government and armed groups peace talks in Doha delayed for 48 hours. Over 10 Kenyan soldiers killed by roadside explosive in southern Somalia. Plus, Somalia extends its election deadline to the end of March. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Adegoke. The president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, who is also the chairperson of the West Africa Regional Bloc ECOWAS, says there is an international dimension to the recent spate of military coups in Africa. President Nana Akufo-Addo told an African Union forum that some foreign entities regard coups in Africa as a means of enhancing their regional ambition, adding that outside influences are behind disinformation campaigns that are undermining the authorities of governments on the continent and also instigating opposition protests. However, Mr. Akufo-Addo gave no details of those he thought were linked to the coups. Recent military takeovers in Burkina Faso, Mali and Guinea have prompted calls for African leaders to promote good governance in order to quell disaffection among citizens. According to the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, 18 African leaders have either modified or eliminated constitutional term limits in the past 2 decades, while another 18 have resisted efforts to institute term limits. A first round of negotiations between Chad's Transitional Military Council and representatives of armed groups set to kick off in Doha, the Qatari capital, has been delayed by 48 hours. The talks, which were expected to start on Wednesday, could mark a critical passage in the country's transition towards elections. Successful peace talks are seen as a key prelude for a national dialogue to take place in N'Djamena, the Chadian capital, in May. There, the ruling Transitional Military Council, TMC, is expected to sit with members of civil societies to establish a constitutional framework for a transition to civilian governance. Chad was thrown into turmoil following the death of longtime ruler President Idris Deby while he was fighting rebels in the country's north last April. His son, Mahamat Idris Deby, known as Kaka, was put in charge by the military with the promise of free elections within 18 months. Two security stories now. Over 10 Kenyan soldiers have been killed by a roadside explosive in southern Somalia. 5 others are said to be seriously injured when their vehicle ran over an improvised explosive device in the Gedo region near the Kenya-Somalia border. Although the names of the killed soldiers have not been revealed, but a former Kenyan presidential aspirant said on Twitter that his younger brother was among the dead. The attack has been blamed on Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab group, which has carried out similar strikes against civilians and security forces convoys. The killed soldiers were part of the African Union mission in Somalia as a peacekeeping force deployed to the country to help the federal government fight the Al-Shabaab militants. Kenyan journalist Cyrus Mbati joins us now from Nairobi for more on this. Hello, Cyrus. Thank you for speaking to us.
Hello. You are fine, Kenya, and you?
I'm fine, thank you. So help us clarify. Let's begin with that, the security situation that led to the deaths of these soldiers.
Sure. The soldiers were in a convoy vehicles which had come to Kenya, the Kenya-Somali border, to fetch some water and food. And they were going back to Somalia, where they usually have a base under the AMISOM group. So, according to reports, about 10 kilometers into Somalia border, that's when they were hit. Actually, the vehicle which was carrying the personnel was hit by an IED. And on the spot, 9 died, and 2 others succumbed to the injuries later on. We have so far 3 injuries, and they are still in a critical condition in the hospital in Nairobi. They were flown to Nairobi.
So have we heard anything, has there been any comment from the government? Because we know, although the names of these soldiers have not been killed, we have a former presidential aspirant saying, his brother was among those killed.
I mean, sure, that's one of the concerns actually the relatives and friends of the affected soldiers have, because the military or the government has been mum about the issue. They are saying, by talking about it, you're killing the morale of those who are in the field so far. They are giving all manner of excuses, but then there's a concern from the relatives and the friends of the victims, because the authorities concerned are yet to give an official statement regarding the attack. All these stories we have now are coming out from the affected victims and those who are surviving so far.
And what of Kenyans? How are Kenyans, reacting to this? We know that before now, the Al-Shabaab has had the grouse with Kenya that they're having their soldiers in Somalia. What has been the reaction?
That's a concern of every Kenyan so far, because many people have been asking why Kenyan soldiers in Somalia. The explanation has been here and there, saying we were there to suppress the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab militant group. And the others are arguing that we should have the soldiers at the main border so that they can now deter the Al-Shabaab from coming to Kenya. Because even the argument of Al-Shabaab is that they're attacking Kenya because Kenyan soldiers are in Somalia. And they're arguing that they should be in Kenya itself. But Kenyan government argues that the decision to move Kenyan soldiers to Somalia was informed by the frequent attacks of Al-Shabaab in Kenya, so that they could now move there to suppress them within Somalia. But now the terrain there, the situation, the conditions have become difficult. Kenyans are concerned. It's a debate which is ongoing. It's coming at the wrong time. We're heading the election time. The current president, I don't think can make a decision on the same, or because we are bound by being members of a AMISOM group. It will now depend on if the withdrawal will come or not. It will depend on the incoming president, which will come after August or after September this year.
All right then, Cyrus Ombati, Kenyan journalist, thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.
Well, we're still on Somalia. The country has again pushed back the deadline for completing parliamentary elections, which are already more than a year overdue because of political disputes. The remaining 50 seats in the country's lower house must now be filled by the end of this month. Somalia has not held a one-person, one-vote election in more than 50 years. Under the current system, MPs are chosen by delegates appointed by clan elders and members of civil society who are selected by regional state officials. The members of parliament will then vote for a new president. The delays have been partly down to strong rivalry between President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, who's also known as Farmajo, and the Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble. The United Nations World Food Programme is warning that the Horn of Africa region is facing the driest conditions since 1981, and that in Somalia, 4.1 million people will struggle to find food if the rains do not come in April. Hungry children and hopeless parents are feeling a terrible drought as they stagger into a camp for displaced families in the Baradera region of southern Somalia.
It hasn't rained on Habiba Mao Iman's farm in southern Somalia for 2 years. Her animals are dead and her crops failed. The 61-year-old is one of tens of thousands seeking aid on the outskirts of Badihira town. According to the United Nations World Food Programme, the Horn of Africa region is facing the driest conditions in more than 4 decades after 3 consecutive rainy seasons failed. They say more than 4 million Somalis, like Iman, will struggle to find food if the rains don't come in April.
No one is helping us. We have no food, we have no water, we even have no clothes and no plastic sheets for shelter. We fled from drought and have been here for 158 days with no food and no shelter for the children. Every day, I go out and knock on houses in town to beg so that my children can eat.
Somalia has experienced a series of catastrophic droughts in the last decade. The Famine Early Warning Systems Network, who was warned that the region could experience its worst drought on record, says global weather patterns indicate that the rains are likely to fall again this year. Lying at the bedside of his sick son, Abdullahi Abdo Mohammed traveled by donkey cart for 6 days to get to Bedhere, only to find the camp in the grip of a measles epidemic.
The food security situation is so poor. Those people have lost everything behind them, that is livestock or agriculture, and they came completely in need of food, shelter, water, health care, everything they want. Majority of them are women and children, as we have seen today in Iftin IDP.
WFP predicts that 1.4 million children under 5 will be acutely malnourished by the end of the year if this year's rain do not materialize. Earlier this month, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the top global climate science authority, said heat waves...
Here in Nigeria, the high cost of cassava and products along its value chain has been a source of concern to many Nigerians who groan daily on the need to reduce prices of this staple food crop. Agriculture scientists in the food systems are even more worried at the seeming helplessness of the situation and have decided to do something about it. The International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA, says the way out of this problem is better access to improved varieties of cassava, which can improve yield per hectare significantly.
Nigeria stands as the largest producer of cassava in the world, with an annual production of over 34 million tons of tuberous roots. Cassava generates cash income for the largest number of households in comparison with other staples like yam, sweet potato, plantain, maize, rice, amongst others. As the largest producer of cassava, as at 2021, a new seed system approach is being developed to compete globally and keep the price of cassava-based food stable and affordable in the country. Food system experts at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA, Ibadan, describe cassava as the engine of economic growth, stressing that Nigeria must take advantage of the economic potentials of the root crop.
We have created a network of young people, farmers in communities, more than 400 as I speak to you, that are producing improved varieties. With that, it will mean that we'll be able to solve the productivity issue. We'll be able to increase the productivity of cassava, and by that put the price of cassava at a reasonable phase where both the consumers and also the farmers will be happy.
The new cassava seed system at the IITA Basic 2 is now multiplying virus-free cassava planting materials at a much faster rate, such that within 2 years of release, the improved planting material are available for the marketplace.
Currently, we have multiplied. Unlike before, when those varieties are improved, they are just on the shelf because there is no channel, there is no way to quickly multiply them and make them available and accessible to farmers. But now, all those are challenges of the past. With the Go seed, we're able to commercially multiply and produce these quality materials of these improved varieties and make them, available to farmers.
For farmers interested in seed production, more information is given on the profitability of the venture.
For you to produce on an hectare of land as a foundation seed producer, you need about 745,000 naira for a cycle of 16 months, in which case you're going to get 1,000 bundles of cassava stem at the end of that cycle, and about 20 tons minimum of cassava roots, which should ordinarily give you nothing less than 1,600,000 naira returns.
The seed system approach, also known as the Basics Model, encourages farmers to adopt new varieties to improve productivity, raise the income of cassava growers and seed entrepreneurs, and contribute to inclusive agricultural transformation across Africa.
Still ahead on the program. Burkina Faso-born architect Diabedo Francis Kere wins architecture's prestigious award, the first African to win this year's Pritzker Prize. Welcome back to the program. Namibia's president has announced that the wearing of face masks will no longer be mandatory in public places. Mr. Hage Gainobo said vaccinated foreign visitors will not require PCR testing also on arrival into the country. The removal of COVID-19 restrictions in the country comes amid a reduction in new virus cases being reported. The president increased the number of people allowed to attend events from 500 to 1,000. He said that people using public transport and those attending indoor events would be encouraged, however, to wear masks. The new measures are expected to be in place for a month. The Mozambican government says it will not succumb to international pressure to change its neutrality in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The southern African nation was among 35 countries that abstained from voting to a UN resolution to demand that Russia stop its offensive and immediately withdraw all troops. Foreign Minister Veronica Macamo said the country would continue to insist on dialogue between the warring neighbors. On Tuesday, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky indicated that there had been progress in the peace talks that are set to continue later. The United Nations Security Council has extended the mandate of the peacekeeping force in South Sudan for a year amid ongoing rebel violence in parts of Africa's youngest nation. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, tweeted that the renewed mandate would help strengthen efforts to prevent sexual and gender-based violence and also enable the peace mission to provide electoral assistance. Russia and China, however, said they were abstaining from the vote. Well, the UN now retains a 19,000-strong contingent comprising of 17,000 soldiers and over 2,000 police officers. A deadly civil war between 2013 and 2018 left thousands dead and millions of people fleeing from their homes. A power-sharing deal signed has failed to stem the violence in many parts of the country, with the UN issuing grim projections about the possibility of holding elections next year. The United Nations Human Rights Office says it has received reports of several executions in Egypt. According to spokesperson for the UN Rights Office, Ravina Shamdasani, the death sentences in these cases were issued in trials that were credibly reported not to have met fair trial and due process standards. UN Human Rights Office is now calling on the authorities to take all essential steps to ensure due process guarantees are adhered to and all necessary safeguards are in place to ensure fair trials.
We have received disturbing reports that at least 7 people were executed in Egypt last week. The death sentences in these cases were issued in trials that were credibly reported not to have met fair trial and due process standards. According to reliable reports from civil society organizations, 4 men were executed on the 8th of March after being found guilty of several terrorism-related charges in what is known as the Hilwan microbus case, in which 8 police officers were killed. And this was in 2016 that this case took place. We understand that the 4 alleged that they were subjected to enforced disappearance and tortured to extract confessions from them. 3 other men are reported to have been executed on the 10th of March, and they had been convicted of joining a terrorist group in connection with attacks carried out in 2014 and 2015. They had also alleged that they were forcibly disappeared and subjected to torture to coerce them into confessing. We're deeply concerned by these latest executions in Egypt, and we reiterate our position of principle that the death penalty should be abolished. We again urge the Egyptian authorities to introduce a moratorium on the use of the death penalty as a first step towards its abolition. We reiterate our deep concern about Egypt's counter-terrorism legislation, especially the vague and overly broad definitions of terrorist group, terrorist crime, and terrorist act.
Or young girls who fled their villages in Burkina Faso to escape forced marriages to much older men are being cared for at a shelter in Kaya that's run by nuns. The girls can now continue their studies there, and they say they look forward to making their own decisions about their future.
Forced marriages are illegal in Burkina Faso, but they remain common, particularly in rural areas, and often involve girls younger than 18. More than 100 child brides have sought refuge with nuns running the Santa Maria Goretti shelter in Kaya. It was after militants attacked 16-year-old Evelyn's village and forced her family to flee that her grandfather offered her hand to a much older man.
We lived in Pisila village until we had to move away because terrorists were attacking the place. My grandfather then called my mother to tell her to bring me to him because he wanted to organize my marriage. I overheard this and escaped to come here.
Going to school has become increasingly challenging in insurgent-hit northern and central Burkina Faso, where recurring attacks have forced hundreds of teachers to shut their doors. For 20-year-old Mary, who is also using a pseudonym, the thought of waking up every morning next to a man she has never met was too much. She had not even been present when her family in northern Burkina Faso arranged her marriage to a complete stranger who was still in another village. One night last month, she ran from her family home until she reached a shelter in the nearby city of Kaya.
The reason why I'm here is that I was to be married off to a man I did not choose. I was a student. I failed my GCSE last year and I planned to do another year, but my parents refused, saying they were organizing my marriage. I'm here because I fled this marriage. The next morning, I went to the social office and they sent me here.
Sister Veronique Cansono, who has seen many girls arriving at the Santa Maria Goretti shelter, says some of them have had harrowing experiences before finally making it to the shelter.
Some of them were beaten. They arrived here covered in lash marks. I think those traditions are good for those who benefit from it, but it's not good for those who suffer from it. That's why I would like to make an appeal. We should all come together to stop these practices. They honor our customs, but they don't honor human beings.
Girls have an opportunity to go to school to learn a trade and even earn money for themselves. The UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, says over 500 million girls and women have been forced into marriages around the world, pointing out that the practice is more common in Africa.
And on a lighter note, Burkina Faso-born architect Diebedo Francis Kere has become the first African to be awarded the Pritzker Architecture Prize, architecture's most prestigious honor. In a statement on Tuesday by the Hayat Foundation that sponsors the award, the 56-year-old was recognized for his pioneering designs that are sustainable to the earth in lands of extreme scarcity. Mr. Kere is a dual citizen of Burkina Faso and Germany, and he says he's the happiest man on the planet to become the 51st recipient of the illustrious prize. The prize was first awarded in 1979. Mr. Kere won plaudits for his 2001 project for a primary school in Gando village in Burkina Faso, where he was born. Unlike traditional school buildings that used concrete, his innovative design combined local clay fortified with cement to form bricks that helped keep the interior cool. The sweeping raised tin roof also provided protection from heavy rain while helping air circulate. Well, congratulations to Mr. Kere. And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.